right, so lately, one of the professors that I work for at the university has wanted I've been writing some analysis software for him over the course of the past few years, and this comes about because he wants all of it written to his website, so he wants his website to be a web app, so that if someone who doesn't have a Windows machine or Mac or whatever I wrote the original software on can use it for any platform, including mobile. So I'll have to format them for that at some point. And I noticed that a lot of universities that have the capability to make web apps for the research groups don't. And it's not necessarily that, I guess software in general, but they don't have a way of really communicating what they do in a way that allows the students to practice the knowledge instead of, oh, hey, here's what I do and come work for my lab. I think it should be, hey, this is some information that can help you study. If you find interest in this, then maybe this is a career for you. And yeah, most of the examples that I see with web apps, especially in AngularJS and JavaScript, it's just to-do apps, and I don't think that pushes the limits of the technology very much. And some scientists are so caught up in their work that they end up doing very esoteric things. They can't necessarily communicate how they do what they do, unless they find a motivated student who's willing to look into it. So the only setbacks, or a few of the setbacks, because there might be many, and there are definitely many good things as well. Some scientists, when they're competing for grant money, they won't necessarily disclose the whole of their research, and making something that presents the methods of the research as well as the data associated with it might have people that it might not necessarily prefer because of this trade secrets thing. Some do lack computing knowledge despite their technical efficacy, because some of the professors talk to them and they can do Fourier transforms by hand in like a couple of hours. It take me or any other students weeks, and they most like, oh, how do I make this presentation work? In any environment that provides relatively low computing capacity, like not parallel processing machines like they have in the physics building. I don't know how big that one is or how many floating point operations per second it can put through it, but they're usually avoided. Anything less than that's usually avoided for processing serious simulations because there are either too many variables or too much data. You don't have throughput. And I already went through the benefits. Yeah, I didn't expect to find very much when I first started looking into this, but during my first few searches, I found more information than I think I could go through in months, and I plan to do that in order to make all this work. I thought it was very interesting because sometimes I would see lists of programs at many different institutions, but nothing that was actually in production or being deployed to the students. And that seems strange to me. It's like they started and then they never finished. Some things to consider before we start, since in this case we're dealing with physicists. They like simple tools so they can just focus on their research and not necessarily the means through which they process their data. Unless they're making an approximation, they think in details, so you can make something that's simple but that addresses details, not that's sort of like in OSX where they're trying to make it as easy as possible for the user. You can, if they have all the small adjustments, it usually makes them happy. And once adjustments are made, it's good to prevent repetitive workflows, because sometimes they work with tabulated data and then it takes hours to process something that would otherwise take a few seconds with a well-written program. It's not preferred. And even though there are many different ways of skinning this cat, as they say, but in this case, I wanted to try AngularJS because with AngularJS, you can bind, it's a presentation framework, so it's sort of like Model View Model, or that variation of MVC and .NET, and that's one of the things that I got into a couple of years ago. So this being similar to it, I like the way it worked. You can bind any data that you process in the back end or methods directly to view and separate them almost completely. And that stops you from having to deal with all the logic in between. Some of the stuff that I wanted to have ready for today were the shot calculator, the grid sample test. My short shield modeling didn't work on my orbit model, so I can't show you guys that. And these other things for plotting image data and just stuff from the VMOs. So give me a second to connect to the computer. Hopefully I'm not making you guys bored enough that I can surf, or that you can surf on it, but I'm trying my best. How do I switch screens?
Well, if you're just on the same cable, it should start working.
Are you using VGA?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, don't worry.
Sorry.
Oh.
Looks like it's not quite plugged in all the way.
He's having the same problem my laptop has because it's the same kind. But
No, it's when you don't have the power adapter plugged in.
Yeah.
Sorry, guys.
Oh, is that also the case with your laptop? Have you never tried it with 2-for-1 solution?
usually just goes away after a little bit.
Like, it's
I don't know what to do. I'm switching screens.
looks like it's okay now.
There's no plug.
One screen.
Oh yeah.
Oh, that's weird. Yeah, we'll only have one.
Everyone look to the left.
This is JavaScript.
See, there's some at the other end as well.
It should be.
There should be one in the middle of the rack.
Yeah.
No, I got it. And that should correct the issue. This one, maybe. There. Murphy's Law.
Over there.
One screen is fine.
All right, as long as you guys are okay. Well, lately, because of this, as of last Friday, I was going to show these separately, but we started turning it into a, you asked me to turn it into a website, so.
I'd like to reject you from that.
Okay. Now in this case, well, there are a couple of things here that we're working right now. Database of materials, in which case, the purpose of these experiments is to study the physical properties of meteorites and to synthesize chemicals at high temperature and high pressure. So shock refers to the what you basically do with these experiments is you shock a material with a large amount of force over a small amount of time, and it reproduces conditions either within the Earth or that you would expect from collisions in space. So this professor is a geophysicist. One of the things that he wanted to do when he does tabulated calculations is look for particular data like the pressure that a shock produces or that a shock material undergoes when you subject it to shock, the velocity in each of the materials, and this allows him to study the particle properties of it after he gets past this stage. So in this case, we have a calculator controller class. that in this case it takes a factory, the production version will take a database or a service that draws data from database materials. And each of these method calls is bound directly to the calculator itself. So inputs become properties, and I can, and you implement an AngularJS, it has property change notification just like MVVM, so you can set various fields to be initialized or to display results using methods instead of properties, which you have to do in other architectures. And in this case, if I pick a series of materials, so it usually uses noble metals, so green, mesonite green again. Put in the distance between the optical triggers and get the velocity of the flyer. So in this case, in most of the experiments he does, he uses a flyer velocity or a material velocity for what he shoots into the sample at between half a kilometer a second and 6. And the setup, he had to take down one of his larger setups, so he's got from 1/2 to 2.5. And so
So Nick, you're pretty far into your time. I think we're a little bit ahead of schedule, but we should probably move into questions and wrap this one up.
all right.
Or just cancel your second talk or whatever.
And if you want to keep going for an extra 10 minutes just on this one and do the second one later, that's.
Oh, no, I
that's cool.
don't. Do you guys have any questions? Kind of going on.
I have a question.
Yes.
So most research groups are not big enough to have a full-time or even like a part-time sysadmin of any sort, so who's going to keep this stuff updated?
Me so far.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's the main thing I worry about. Long term, if you want these to be around for future generations of students.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you built it right, it should stay around. It shouldn't need to be updated, right?
Yeah.
Isn't that not how software works?
Yeah. Where do you, we're still using stuff from written in the 70s.
So,
Where do you put the functions in your Angular scheme? Is it in the controller or?
Yeah, in the controller class.
Am I sharing that or it's fair you understand? It's a trade secret, you shouldn't.
No, it's
I don't know, Mike.
some professors are like that.
Where's this help?
So you're using
Doesn't really
Visual
highlight
Studio
very
for
well.
AngularJS development?
It's something that I'm used to, so yes. When I use the Mac, I use Slim Text. And I open the browser. But no, it is put throughout. So when the data changes in the model in one field, then it's processed by the method.
Okay.
So I should start with that.
Good.